Hey, there's your hand up. Thanks, buddy.
All right, we're working. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've got a bunch of slides we're going to go through. I want to first of all tell you why you need this tax-free savings account, how we're going to ramp it up, and then vehicle where you can actually make money and benefit from it. So if you were an adult in 2009, this is what your tax-free savings account can be today, $63,500. I'm going to walk you through what this thing can look like. Woo, slow down. Guys, help me here. This is the problem. Sorry, I need help. Where's my help? I pushed the wrong button and I just jumped.
Oh no.
Sorry, I'm not a presenter.
Just keep introducing yourself.
Okay, so anyway, the $63,500 is what your tax-free savings account would be today if you were an adult in 2009. If we were to make 10% interest on that thing per year, and you were to put your $6,000 minimum that you can put in each year, because the tax-free savings account has caps. So right now it's at $6,000. It started out, it was about $5,000. With inflation, it moves. Sometime throughout what I'm going to walk you through, it'll be larger than 6%, but I'm going to use the 10% interest rate as an example of where we're going. So today, you're at $63,500. The green is your profit. The total amount invested out of your pocket is the blue. In 5 years, if you started doing this at $6,000 a year and you made your 10%, you would be at $121,000. In 10 years, $231,000. 409 in 15 years, in 20 years, you'd be 695,000, and you'll crack $1 million in 23 years. This is all for excitement on where we're going on this. That will take a total of $201,500 out of pocket to get to that $1 million. Going into this again, if you were to take this money out at 10% and you were to pay yourself at that point, it is all tax-free money, which is $100,000 a year roughly. That is the same if you were taxed at 48%, making $192,000 in passive income. So that's the effect on why you want to use the tax-free savings account. If we use the average stock market return of 6 to 8%, that $192,000 has the same force of $2.4 million. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so if my voice cracks, I might have put a halt in. Are we all following on why we want this tax-free savings account working? Perfect. Again, that was $201,500 out of your pocket to build it to there. If you took your $100,000 a year income by your $201,000, that's a total of 49% return on the money you actually earned. The rest of this is, like I say, it'll be passive income. Now, if you don't want to leave the money in your tax-free savings account to build to $1 million, I can tell you currently, if you were making that 10% on $63,000 for a 2-year average, if you were to pull out $500 a month, you would qualify for an additional $39,000 in debt on your mortgage. So it's another avenue to build up your cash flow to get another house. Okay? So what do I do with my TFSA? You can do stocks and ideas like some do, or you can go into real estate and passive income. And that's where we're going to get into how I'm going to show you how you can make 7 to 12% on your RSP, your tax-free savings account, or any ideal cash. The topic is private mortgage lending. Why private mortgage lending? First of all, the banks do not invest in mutual funds. They do not invest in stocks. That is what they sell. They simply lend. Warren Buffett, we all know who he is. He was the major shareholder and investor in Home Trust. If you've heard of this B lender, it's one of Canada's big B lenders. They're based out of Toronto. Just a little bit extra. Warren Buffett did it. I'm just saying for credibility. But the main thing is you don't have to be on the massive million scale. We can bring it back because ultimately people are born all over the place. So what private lending is not, it's not extreme high stress. There's no tenants, there's no toilets, there's no repairs, and there's no vacancy. Who borrows private money? There's homeowners with lots of skin in the game. You guys are used to tenants that are putting down damage deposits. They make the payment. Well, don't kid yourself. People that borrow private money make it as well. They can have excellent credit, good credit, or bad. Usually their ratios with their income are off. They might be claiming a little too low because they're self-employed, and that's throwing a lot of people into the private lending loop right now. The other thing is self-employed Canadians, I mentioned, new to Canada. There are a lot of communities that are coming to Canada. They have ample money, but it's not recognized in Canada because they haven't paid the taxes to deserve the A lending rate yet. And then ultimately real estate investors such as yourself. So what can you earn as a private lender? First mortgages are typically 7 to 10% paid monthly. That's an annual interest rate paid monthly. Seconds are 10 to 14%. Thirds are 14% and higher. Bridge loans, they vary. Now here's the basics of lending. I've got various licensing levels, so please excuse my disclaimer because now I'm going to teach you some stuff on how to properly do a safe loan, get your money back, and so on. So I'm just going to throw that up to satisfy all the boys on the other end. So just a general understanding. We all know what a mortgage is. A first mortgage is generally the first charge that gets put against the property. In this particular case, if you look at a first mortgage in the green and the property equity and the difference, that is typically how a loan would look going onto a property. A second mortgage, which is a little bit more risky, you would, sorry, I'm getting off track. You know, usually I do this stuff one-on-one and I got an hour and a half, and now I've only got 45 minutes of an audience, so just bear with me. So first mortgage, you get caved against title. A second mortgage just goes behind it, like we're saying, and then a third mortgage would be behind that as well, in the third. So, sorry, let me collect my thoughts. Like I say, I'm not a public speaker. I'm great one-on-one. So what I'm trying to describe or show you here is the first mortgage, the second mortgage, and the third mortgage on the title as it goes, and you're leaving equity in there. But don't confuse yourself with the third mortgage being the most risky, because in some terms, the third mortgage is just, it's what's on title, and then it's your equity that you're going up with. I'm so good with one-on-one questions here. All right, getting into the loan term, and I'll cover this a little bit more. Loan terms for private money generally range from a few months to up to 5 years, depending on what you're looking at. There are different types of loans for different types of property. You would want to assess things differently if it's farmland versus a house or a commercial property. Property location does come into play, whether you're urban or in Timbuktu up in Rainbow Lake. Not to pick on Rainbow Lake, but I just received a deal that was up in Rainbow Lake that had great attributes, but ultimately it was Rainbow Lake. We'll get into why we wouldn't want to do that deal. The main thing we want to focus on is the math. And the reason for the math is we always want to find what's in it for them, for the lenders, or for the borrowers. People get concerned whether individuals borrowing private money are default higher or they're no good. The key to this game is ultimately to have a what's in it for them. We do that with the equity, because they've got money on the line. We do that with the property, whether they're new owners or they've been in it for a long time. And then we review the applicant. Some applicants, $60,000 is nothing to them. The next applicant, $60,000 is a life-changing amount. So at that point, we gauge to see how tied are how tied in they are on. Sorry, it's gonna get dry. Now, the number one thing when it comes to the math, I lent a friend of mine a chunk of change a while back. We did loans back and forth nonstop, and ultimately she paid me each time. We had a great relationship until the day she died. The day she died was the day I lost my money. I had no security. I had nothing to go off of, and ultimately what do? You take a person that's passed away to court. You can't do it. So my motto is you gotta lend like you're dead. I have done a loan since that I got called in at 1 p.m. from a law office to send the money over by 2 o'clock. This was on a Thursday. 5 o'clock Friday afternoon, the fellow passed away. I was paid out Tuesday morning. So that's the importance of the security when it comes to lending. Ultimately, that's what our main focus is. We are asset lenders. We are not credit lenders. So when everything hits the fan and it all goes bad, as long as we got security, we're covered. So going back into the math. The loan to value, LTV, is the main thing you want to focus on. If you look at the numbers you want to look at with the loan to value, like going back into it, you want to have equity in it at all times. So a rough number that we always run by, if we're all private, we'll stop at 80% of the loan's value. And if there's banks involved that have cheaper rates in the first, like I say, I don't want to get too, this is more of a basic, but then we will go to a higher advance. But for the most part, you want to stop at 80%. You got a 20% cushion to collect interest, legal fees, anything that happens if you weren't to get paid. Now with that 80%, you want to be careful when you look at high-end properties, because you could say, hey, I got 80% or I got 20% equity of 1.2, but ultimately a 1.2 house could drop $50,000, $75,000, 10% just in a negotiation in a rough market with a good realtor. So you got to be cautious up there. You also have to be cautious if you are at 80% of, say, a $200,000 property, because then at that point, you've got $40,000 worth of buffer to collect your interest, to collect your legal fees and your selling costs in the event that you have to take the property back. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Now, to get into verifying the borrower, we look over the application. The application is more the secondary. The first thing is we look at the property. The applicant, to make sure that they have an ability to pay, and just how long they've been at their jobs. Are they new? Are they new to self-employed? Is it a new separation? If it was, because shocks can happen in people's lives. Like, let's say they were new to self-employed and they were used to getting $10,000 a month income from their old job, and they think that self-employment is going to take off really great and they're only making $5,000. So that could cause a shock in the system. So you want to watch for something like that. The other thing you want to watch for is a newly separation, where two people were dependent on each other, and now we have double the debt with two properties, and one spouse or the other spouse can't keep up with the payment. That'll cause a ripple. Those are just a couple of examples. Credit, to give you a little bit of an idea on credit, 680 or better is really excellent. It's for sure excellent in the private world, but banks will look at you at a 680 or better. Average 600, poor is 500. For the most part, when you're looking at private, up until these bank changes with the B20, you were sitting in a situation of 500s for credits. But now with the bank changes, most self-employed people cannot get an A mortgage that they were used to because they don't claim the same income they do. Ultimately, I'm seeing credit today on the way here from Calgary. I see 969 credit. That's a record. I've never seen it before. Most of the time, it's like in the 700s. But just to give you an idea, the credit is all over the place. So it doesn't mean you're down and out because you're using private money. It could be very nice. When I look at the photo ID and I'm underwriting the file, I really do the same thing as you're doing with a tenant. I want to look to see whether there's been a recent issue date that's come out and their address checks out to see if they're doing a refi. And what this does is just avoids any fraud and so on. The other thing I'll do is I'll check them on Google, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Do a little back history. You know, you can do a little research on what the borrower is. I've seen nothing, obviously, on some borrowers, and I've seen in other cases you can have like a bad write-up of. Well, I had a lawyer that was smart one time, so obviously you want to do a little homework on who you're dealing with because it's a little bit of a people-to-people business versus with the banks, it's stuck on the system, right? Now, looking at the employment, I did talk a little bit about the fact that self-employment. New to self-employment can be a shock. I've seen employment that they've been working for the government for 18 years, for example. I've seen employment that's new, like I described. So at the end of the day, it's the same kind of underwriting that you're looking at when you're going to put a tenant in place. But in this case, again, we're focusing a little bit more on the equity or on the asset. I'll also look to see if there's any existing mortgages, whether they've got other properties that they're feeding, or if there's other debt that they have to worry about taking care of, or if they have other assets that we can look at. And then ultimately, with the existing mortgages, we want to see what the loan to value is on the property, so I would check that as well. And then other debt, you know, credit cards. A lot of people will come and borrow money to wipe out credit cards because they can get cheaper rates, and then there's the other ones that maybe they got various car payments and so on. And then the main thing that I look at with other assets is sometimes with these private loans, if I'm at 80% and the credit's bad and they've got, say, a $50,000 or $60,000 RSP, there's a fallback note. So you know you're not going to be the last one to get paid. Okay? And when I look at the property, my initial thing is I look at the tax assessment, but as we all know, the tax assessments are not exactly what the property is worth. It's a guess and it's a guideline. In Calgary recently, I had a 535 tax assessment that appraised out for $431,000. So you don't want to use that as a complete guide at the value, but it kind of gives you an overview. And then you'd want to jump on Google Street View to take a look at what's going on around the property. There was a property here in Edmonton, I think it was actually the southeast corner, that had about 6 or 8 cars in the back driveway that you could see that were, well, not the back driveway, but the back lawn. So you could see that it was like an environmental issue. So just something to check out. It kind of gives you a preliminary on what the place looks like. And then the mogul guys, you don't want to bug them all the time, but if you've got a good relationship with them, you can check out the MLS history. And I like to check this out to see whether there was a past grow-up that maybe isn't showing on title. There could be multiple times the house has been sold, which could say that there might be some underlying thing that you don't know about. Or ultimately, they say that they bought it at $300,000 and put a $50,000 rental in there. Well, sometimes you can see old pictures to say, yes, okay, this property was renovated. And it's just doing a little bit of homework to double check the story that's coming through before you do the loan, right? And then we look at the property title. Big thing, obviously, the owner's name. Make sure they own the property. But another thing I look for is the transfer date. This transfer date gives me a what's in it for them. If they've owned this house for 4 months and they're flipping it, they don't care like the guy that's owned it since 2000 and once had it paid off and needs to get a loan to pay off CRA debt. So that, again, going back to the what's in it for them, this kind of shows that they're attached to this property and that payment is going to get made. And then the other thing we look for is different caveats and registrations. It could be the mortgage that's in first place, the mortgage that's in second that you could be taking out. There could be CRA writs, or there could be absolutely nothing on the title. But you just do a quick check on it. Then we check out the appraisal. When it comes to the appraisal, the number one thing you want to make sure that they're certified accredited appraisal. And number two, it's lender ordered. Do not rely on somebody else's ordered appraisal, because ultimately he who orders the appraisal gets to dictate what the appraisal is for. When I say that, you want to have as-is market value. I've seen appraisals ordered by borrowers that show as approved in small print, and you don't catch it unless you read. I've seen appraisals come in from borrower requested that say the land is going to be rezoned, but in small print it stipulates that, so you don't catch it off the numbers. So again, this is the importance of a lender ordered appraisal from somebody that is knowledgeable of it. And then ultimately you want to do a site visit. When everything's been approved and you come to a deal, you go and meet the people, see what they are on their best terms, check out the house. You want to see if there's any mold or anything in the showers that the appraisals don't catch up. And I'm not saying because you're doing a bad loan that the house is going to be in shambles. I put loans on houses that are in mint condition. You'd be surprised who borrows this money. Yeah, it's just, a lot of people think that if you have to go private, you have a problem, but I've got a deal that showed up on the way up here today. There are 4 individuals that are buying 16 acres of land. They are putting 50% down. Their credit is all 7.25 or better, and they can't get approved at the bank. So it's a no-brainer loan, right? 50%. You've got tons of equity in there. And again, like when somebody's got a 969 credit, like they say, I've never heard of it. There might be a mortgage broker in the room that might have seen that, but I didn't think they even got that high, to tell you the truth. So then when you're looking at the site visit as well, you just want to quickly check the neighbors. And you're just double checking the property, because ultimately if something does go sideways and you have to take this property back and you lent too much money, you do have the choice of keeping the home after foreclosure. So do you want to keep the home? If it's enough down that you're lending on, well, it might be a perfect fit for you guys. But if it's a starter home out in those burbs, you may not want to tackle that as ownership. So again, you just double check it. And then ultimately you're going to instruct the file over to the lawyer. What you're going to send is the mortgage details, the applicable schedules, borrower details, and borrower's lawyer. The reason why I say the borrower's lawyer is there's 2 lawyers always involved. I recommend 2 lawyers always involved on a file. There's your lawyer and there's the borrower's lawyer. The borrower's lawyer, the borrower is ultimately responsible to pay for both of those mortgages or both of those bills. So you as the lender is just like if RBC were to walk in there and lend you money on your up-down, you paid their legal bill as well. The borrower pays it in this case. The mortgage details, that would be your commitment that you made up that has the borrower's names, the title of the property, the interest rate, the terms of the loan. Any applicable schedules could be, let's say you went and seen that site visit and you realized that there was a shower that had a problem and there was mold in behind it. And ultimately you felt as though that was a risk towards your security. Well, you could take a portion of that loan and then make sure that they renovate the shower and get it done. So you put it on a draw, is what they call it. You would hold that money back at the lawyers, and the applicable schedule would just say, release this money once I can verify the shower's done, just as an example. And then your closing package. What you would receive there is pretty well the same sort of thing that you're going to get when you buy a house, but in this case, you've got a closing statement that shows where the funds are going. You have a signed note. Ultimately, the note is the promissory note that makes them owe you the money. and then you have a signed mortgage. The signed mortgage is what gets gated against the property and helps you foreclose and give you the security. On top of that, you have a title insurance policy that's in your name. If there's anything wrong with the title, you're covered just like the bank is. And then property insurance policy. If you are in second place or third place or third place, there's a property insurance policy that's named to your name or your Olympia Trust account if you were to have a tax-free savings account, or your numbered company if you were to lend that way. And what that does is if the property does get wiped out and it's burnt to a crisp, the checks get written to you directly from the insurance company. You don't have to go chase for it and foreclose and go on. Now, in the event that the insurance does not get paid and it cancels for some reason through the midterm or the term of your note, and you're not insured anymore, there is a clause within the law that you can put insurance on the property and you can bill the borrower for it so you're protected. When it comes to lending, it's kind of like have your cake and eat it too. You get everything but the upside appreciation of the property is really what it comes down to. And then ultimately you'd have post-dated checks or direct deposit depending on how much you get paid. And then following up, you'll receive a property title with a new registration showing that you're a secured creditor on the title. Now to get into the foreclosure, let's say that things don't work out and you've got to go to the lawyer and foreclose. The simple process is you would send a demand letter. This is typically 30 to 45 days that you give them to either find a new borrower or a new lender to take you out, sell the property, or get you your money back. If they do not come through in that time, then you would issue the courts would issue a statement of claim and put the note in default. And generally, depending on how much equity is in the property and a few other things, you have about a 6-month, the borrower has about a 6-month redemption period. And through this time, again, they can refinance the property, sell the property, whatever it takes to get you in order. And then if they don't get it at that point, there's about a 90-day judicial listing sale that you would have it listed. And if it still doesn't sell, that's when you take over. Now, the one thing to note, if you are in second position on a mortgage and it is going into foreclosure and the first is not getting paid, you are ultimately responsible to protect your position by making those payments on the first mortgage. With that said, this is why we only go to 80% or we have equity in the property, because as you make those payments, you make the same interest rate on that money as your loan does, and you collect that money back. If there is equity in the property, you should not lose money. I want to use the word you will not, but I just, for the sake of it, have to say you should. That is the #1 name for this game. It's equity first, it's ability to pay second, and honestly, for the most part, who cares about the credit? There's sometimes I'll look at it and I'll see some judgments and we want to clean it up a little bit. But when there's money on the line, and let's say it's $50,000 or $100,000 worth of equity, and this is money that matters to somebody, they make their payments. And if they don't make their payments, you ultimately still collect on the way out. And again, it goes until their equity's gone. If a realtor lists it, the real estate commissions again come out of the equity. It doesn't come out of your loan balance. Okay? So in summary, don't forget rule #1. You gotta lend like they're dead. And I don't mean to be crude with that, but honestly, it sucks when you lose $80,000 and somebody passes away. But ultimately, it's a lesson that I was able to pass on to other people. You get your security, you get your equity, you'll get paid. You always leave a what's in it for the borrower if you take too much, if you charge too much, if you don't look at the other side of the page as well. You've got a one-sided agreement, and ultimately you're going to have failure. And then control your funds. That's the beauty of the tax-free savings account. When you go with a company like Olympia Trust, you control it, you get paid, they notify you if there's an NSF, you log in, you can see the payments at all time. No one cares what you do about your money. And remember, $201,500 figure on your tax-free savings has the same financial impact as 2.4. So you want to get these tax-free savings to work. Now I do have a couple free gifts. I got some Money Depot case. There we go. I got some Money Depot case studies. These are just some examples of some deals I have done. And I've got an RSP TFSA setup package that is through Olympia Trust with my guy Caddy down there. Use the gift code MOGUL if you don't mind, if you want to contact me on that. And then we'll get it sent out. Any questions? This is the part I really love. So we can talk about deals and get it going, and you guys will get my full attention. So Who can ask me some questions so I can get you on track on where my mind's at, and we can work away on mortgages. Okay, here.
What's the percentage of actual defaults? What have you ran into?
Okay,
How long
I
have you
did.
been-
Okay, I subscribe to all the foreclosures in Alberta. I do it through my own list. I don't pay a list. So I actually counted it. There's been 104 private mortgage foreclosures in Alberta for February, March, and April. And there were either 957 or 967 foreclosures, whether it's CIB, like any of the banks, is really it. Does that kind of answer it?
But when you're talking about secondary lending, how many have you, when you've done a deal like this for somebody else, what's the percentage? Like,
Of the failure rate?
Yeah.
For me, to be honest with you, I don't get a lot to fail because number one, when I'm doing these deals, I'm in charge of collection and I really don't want to do the work. So when I look at it, number one, again, I find out what's in it for them. If I see somebody making $500,000 a year and they've only got 30 grand on the line, for example, I won't like that deal as much as somebody that's making 70 grand a year that has that same amount on the line. So I weigh those options there. I weigh out the house and the security. You get a property that's say $450,000. The type of owner that's usually in there is a little bit more tied to it. You'll want to look at primary properties over rental properties. At the end of the day, we all make our own mortgage payment before we make the tenant's mortgage payment in some cases. Now, on that example, if you were to go and do a loan on a tenant-occupied property and they stop paying you, we have a form that's called a assignment of rents that gets caveated on the title, just like any rental that you have. And what that does is gives you the ability to go knock on the door and pass it to the tenant and start collecting the rent yourself. With that said, generally rentals are a quicker foreclosure because there's less personal involvement. It's like you do a loan to somebody that's elderly, the courts will treat it a little bit different than somebody that's like 35 and they can do their thing, right? You know, so it's kind of a common sense balance out. Does that kind of help a little bit? Go ahead.
Do you do private lending for mobile home parks?
Mobile home parks, yes, but it's funny you brought this up because I had a little video I wanted to share and it came up mobile home parks. You don't want to do mobiles. And no offense to anybody who lives in a mobile. The problem is the mobile home goes down in value like your car and there's no real asset there. So at the end of the day, you don't want to do a loan on that. You want something that's secure, that does not run away, that generally goes up in value and has some security to it. And that's the beauty of doing like a 12-month loan. Generally, the real estate market is quite slow. It doesn't have the impacts of say 07 when it really jumped up. So over a 12-month period, when you're in the term on there, you don't like the houses won't move that much. So generally, you are at 80%. You know when it flows through. And the other thing that I'll add on there is if you've got a principal interest first mortgage on it with the bank, that balance is dropping. So ultimately, you're gaining a little extra security that way as well. There was a few hands. Okay.
So what's the minimum amount you need for a property?
The minimum for
Minimum amount you need for a
the minimum amount for a property. I've done a loan as small as 20,000. I've done them into the millions.
80%?
80%. So if I were to focus on Edmonton at 80%, I would want to stop at about $600,000 on a purchase, on a value of a property, because the sweet spot's in that 4 to 5. You won't see much market fluctuation. You generally got private or homeowner occupied properties.
So if I got 20%, you lend me 80%, right?
If you had which, sorry?
If I got 20%, you lend me 80%.
If you had 20, yes. Yeah.
So you need additional collateral, depends on my credit.
You know what, when I say I don't really care about the credit, the closer I get to 100% loan to value, I do care about the credit. So when I get to 80, I care more than if I'm at 60.
What are the interest rates usually?
The interest rates on the first 7 to 10% is usually what an investor will make in Alberta's market. And then on the seconds, it can be 10, 12. It's usually at 18%. I'm putting a lot out at 13.5. So, and that the 63,500 sweet spot of the tax-free savings account. Usually when we do these loans, we'll do a first to 65% loan to value and then the second to 80. And it happens to be like 65%, 15%. Well, if you take $63,000, that's 15% of the typical house now. So it works, you know. No. Sorry, I got another. Does that answer it?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so with your interest rates, do you kind of put out interest rate based on the risk of the loan, or do you have like a set rate for each person?
You know, for the most part, they're pretty set, but they range a little bit. Like I had one that was, we took out a foreclosure in Calgary and we went to 80% on it because really they had the ability to pay. There was a mishap in life that caused the line of credit to be called. And line of credits, they don't really give you any room for wiggle. They'll call those things fast. So in that particular case, I did bump it up a little bit because, hey, we are taking out a foreclosure, so it's not as good as the one that's, you know, borrowing the money to maybe pay off a credit card or go buy another revenue property or something. So I play with it a little bit. For the most part, you guys as the investors, you're going to say, hey, I want to get my returns, right? You know, so you just, if you go too high, keep in mind, why is that borrower accepting that deal? And if you go too low, well, you've got to make something as well. So, you know, for the most part, everybody ties in high interest, high risk. It's the opposite when it comes to private lending. It's truly a secret that's out there that it's huge in the States. We're going to see it more so here now that the banks have tightened up. It don't give mortgages to just anybody. And what is it? Something like 0.1% of mortgages actually go into default on the A level. So think about those guys that put 5 or 10% down. Those don't default. They're riding on their credit. Again, now look at the one that's put down 20 or 25% as a real chunk of money. Well, that's credit, right? No stress. Well, but with that, there is a stress test. So when you look at a self-employed, especially, everybody claims as little as possible, and I'm one of them. So you'll get guys that have like 50 or 60 grand, but they actually have the ability for a couple $100,000 or something. So you do it's whatever makes sense, right? You know, and going back to that application, like when you look at certain jobs, like I had somebody that sent me a deal one day that warehouse manager at Costco, $618,000 a year. So you say BS, right? And that's where you would call them out on it. But ultimately, I was proved wrong, just for the record. That's what they actually did. It was a T4 show, so I couldn't believe it. But, you know, usually I would say if they said $61,000, I would say, okay, you know, it kind of makes sense. You know, so 61, they've got $5,000, and the mortgage payment with these seconds might be $400. So it's not a big change in their life. The biggest thing you want to stop whatever is happening to them if it is a problem that they're borrowing, and you got to watch payment shock. You don't want to lend them too much because ultimately they can't handle the payment at that point, and that's what causes problems. It's not that people are bad when they miss payments; they were given too much credit for their ability at the time. Okay. Okay. I don't have one there, I can tell you. So this is kind of what I wanted to say in those slides, and I'd rather just have an open conversation. It works easier for me. The general guideline, like I say, equity, where's the property, what type of property is it, does the property need work, so I'll look at that. The price point of the property, how much fluctuation and risk do I have, where is it located? You know, a property here in Edmonton is going to sell so much easier than one in Edson, for example, in this market. Again, the job, how long have they been there? And is it a new job, an old job? You know, how long have they lived at the home? So you kind of just you want to piece their life together and make sense of it. And then usually if somebody's coming in and they want to do debt consolidation, they're not behind on their credit cards, but they're paying 24% on that credit card. Well, they're happy to get 13, 14% on a mortgage because they are saving. And then it opens up their credit lines. It increases their credit scores, and then hopefully helps them get refinanced back with the bank. And the other thing is the refinancing cannot go past 80% now with that new B20. So that's another reason why I try to focus at 80, because it gives the borrower an out. When they go to refinance the house, the banks won't allow to go past 80% anymore. So when you stay at 80, it gives an out. Once they get this item fixed, they can now go to the bank and gets you taken out. That's kind of a payback. You know, does that make sense for you? Yeah, in my particular case, I do it all, but I want to kind of give you guys a way